is capital J, capital B, lowercase o, capital G, N, D. Can I have your phone, please, to keep time?
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, do you see the app disclosure?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. All right, for anybody watching this, we agreed to take slight liberties with time because we haven't really practiced our cases or scrimmaged our cases. All right, on my first word. Conflicting ethical viewpoints does not require the inevitable exclusion of one over the other, but rather the acceptance that both can be relevant and a valuable ethical tool. Thus, the meta-ethic should be moral pluralism. Prefer this. 1. Empirics. Best studies prove pluralistic tendencies rather than one or the other. Examining these studies makes somewhat clear that moral statements, if classified as objective, others were classified as non-objective. Dartley studies may have favored meta-ethical pluralism. More studies have confirmed this. Objectivity ratings for statements vary between 5% and 85%. Ethical claims should be grounded in statistical and empirical proof. It's the only way to verify contextual value of any theory that's the basis of corroborating our argumentation. 2 is resolvability. Thousands of years of meta-ethical debates have concluded in indecisiveness. A 45-minute debate would be unable to correctly resolve nebulous ethical disputes and identify correct theory. Resolvability outweighs on jurisdiction. That's a meta-constraint on the judge's final jurisdiction. Your ballot, part 2, is pragmatic reorientation. Our framework is pragmatism. Meaning only makes sense within a frame of reference that isolates the practical difference that makes it an action. Pierce 1. What we call a thing hard, it lies in its conceived effects. There's no difference between a hard thing and a soft thing so long as they are not breath to attest. Thus, suppose that then a diamond could be crystallized in the midst of a cushion. Soft cotton should remain there until it was finally burned up. Would it be false to say that a diamond was soft? What would occur under circumstances which does not arise fact, but only by arrangement? This commits us to practical deliberation as a method of moral inquiry. A method of moral inquiry. Sarah 1. Ethics is valuable through examination of past actions and self-corrections. Moral inquiry is performed in a deliberative way, weighing argumentations and principles and comparing them with consequences or experiences that impinge upon the subject. Such responsiveness is a part which makes a moral decision. This deliberative activity implies an effort to acquire habits that contribute to free deliberation. The activity takes the form of experimentation and the real living thing, and the living conclusion is that experimental habit. Thus, judge, the standard is promoting pragmatic deliberation. Prefer 1. Value pluralism. Other ethical theories rely on minimalistic criteria as foundation. Our framework resolves this by using criteria to better inform our judgments. La Follette 2K. Practice outrules criteria. Criteria are not fixed. As we obtain new evidence, we find what was appropriate may not be conducive to the new one. The moral world is complex and unchangeable. No set of criteria could give us unequivocal answers about how we should behave in all circumstances. As environments change, pragmatic criteria are tools we use to make informed judgments. Emergent criteria become integrated into our habits, informing the ways we react to our world. Other theories can isolate morally relevant features. The pragmatist absorbs these insights and shapes how he or she habitually responds. Materiality. Our framework moves away from abstraction and understands knowledge as changing in order to base social change and revision of ideas. Glaude 7. Philosophy is to deal with problems that human beings. Knowledge is the fruit of the undertakings. We seek the enrichment of our immediate experience through the control of action. We turn to actual consequences, pursuing a future grounded in value shaped by experiments. We tinker with the understanding that all facts are fallible. Solidarity captures pragmatism as a tool of social improvement, life and broadening the ground of individual self-improvement, and a caring disposition towards the plight of our fellows. 3. Social relations are dynamic and constantly being descended from normative systems of knowledge. Only pragmatism's understanding of interactive knowledge production can mitigate entrenched violence. Catalog 8. Experience is social, active, and educated. Experimental continuum, the transformation of potential of social intelligence intrinsic to democracy is not utopian. It expresses a moral commitment that working in favor of social intelligence is our best shot at crafting institutions that will further new opportunities for capacities. The process of experience is more important than any result is educative. Social intelligence is decentered. Our experience through manifold communication and subject interactivity. We are not passive receivers, but dynamic interactors. Attitudes adjusted critical potential of lived experience. There are new opportunities to exploit cracks and transform of power. The flux of our world is producing new opportunities for this transformative resistance. Under conditions we need not fixed foundations, but flexible habits of communication. Part 3 is the impact calculus. 1. Deliberation is procedural, not substantive, which means that we are first concerned with the decision-making procedure of deliberation, then evaluation of what impacts matter most. To clarify, consequences are a sequencing question. Sarah 2. Deliberation is not directly responsible for directing action, but does so indirectly. The effort to reinforce certain habits. The task of the pragmatist is to inform final solutions, but only the testing and communication of experiences, the superiority of one idea can be demonstrated. Contention 1 is interestedness. Laws are incapable of ethical deliberation. Objectify targets and can't base decisions on particularities. Humans felt emotion and empathy. Ethical judgment gives people means to minimize harm. It enables them to make decisions based on a particular context. Weapon systems with base actions on algorithms which don't work well in unpredictable situations. Ethical judgment helps humans weigh different factors to prevent arbitrary loss of life. It would be difficult to recreate such judgment. These robots would make decisions based on algorithms, reducing their human targets to objects, which is the consequence of the scenario that we're about to describe. 2 is depersonalization. Laws categorize people as friend or enemy, which causes a violent rather than adversarial relationship when conflict arises. Dan Locke 15. The U.S. is the only nuclear power that signed the UN anti-laws force. Laws presupposes categorization. Laws are able to find its human, trace in its code. This presupposes the thematization of the object without an ethical deliberation. The other is reduced to algorithms. Laws forcing a certain essence by categorizing the other, which then becomes a friend or an enemy. This binary logic can't function or be meaningful without reducing entities to numbers, codes, and images. This relation between the human being behind laws of the thematic dehumanized enemy in which the same dominates or absorbs the other. Laws require a depersonalization already made. Depersonalization is produced. One becomes a target before being targeted, a defined enemy before hostiles, deprived and deprivation. It is not distance, but the fact that the weapon systems are violence happens through the categorization of the other. Laws through imagery codes and algorithms. The pre-programmed ethical behavior of the robot because of uninterrupted thematization. Advantages of the plan. Consider the scenario, Judge. I affirm the resolution to resolve. The United States ought to maintain a strong military presence globally to ensure international stability and protect international interests. I'll define international stability as the mean by which any nation can reasonably expect to deliberate diplomatically rather than military to resolve action. School scenario leads to proliferation, super weapons, and AI-generated autonomous, non-deliberative means to warfare. Laws, Gurhans 16, cryptographic proof of accountable human control as a way to ensure compliance with a ban on autonomous weapons. The killer arms race has popped off. DARPA and the Navy are particularly active in efforts to develop autonomous systems received globally. Russia moved to create its own versions. China has been developing robotic weapons. Every significant military power is looking in this direction, except for, of course, the U.S., which has banned it. It clears the way for vigorous development of autonomous weapons. Networks of autonomous weapons, once started, rapidly escalate out of control. Negotiating rules by the time you sort out a false alarm. Autonomous weapons that have already started filing, destroying our pragmatic deliberation. The further we go, the harder it'll be to walk back. Banning autonomous weapons is an essential step to ending the arms race scenario. The new developments in international law have put crisis management on the brink. Each threat triggers cataclysmic nuclear war. Johnson 21. Emerging technologies are rapidly creating new means for non-state actors without the physical contact of threat vectors, actions to penetrate or manipulate nuclear command systems with AI-enhanced capacities, data manipulation, malware, false flag cyber operations are spoofing with disinformation. Developments in AI-enabling technology have exacerbated vulnerabilities and introduced additional threat vectors which participate in cataclysmic nuclear war. During the crisis involving strategic dialogue, the consequences would be catastrophic. Judge, we offer you multiple internal links. International stability, lack of hegemony, and multipolarization threatens international stability even if it proves possible. Capability matters more than practice. Horowitz and Shari 21. The U.S. promised to ban, but China and Russia have not. Alarming military's adoption of AI, the way it could increase the risk of war and international stability. Even the military's managed safety and security concerns. Properly functioning AI systems would create challenges for international stability. Accelerate the tempo of warfare. Hyperwar. Humans would lose control over escalation, and war termination would be significantly complicated. The machines fight at a pace faster than humans. The delegation to machines can mean that accidents could spiral out of control and reach catastrophic proportions. The transition of military capabilities to software could make it harder for policymakers to accurately judge military capabilities. Incomplete information would increasing costs and miscalculation. Change threshold for risk taking. Because fewer human rights of risk, let's see AI systems as uniquely dangerous, hinge on human perception. Militaries could adopt immature technology too quickly when balancing accidents versus falling behind. Militaries place safety as a secondary consideration. AI systems are unreliable when they're trained with inadequate data sets and seemingly deceivingly capable. Self-fulfilling prophecy of the bottom of safety heightens the risk of accidents and instability, has deleterious effects on crisis stability, has no ability to understand broad guidance. Commanders would have one programming even if those rules no longer make sense. This forces human decision makers to tie their own hands, killing pragmatic deliberation. Non-lethal actions can be perceived as escalatory or inflame public sentiment. Leaders decide to terminate hostilities, but this continuation of conflict would undermine that deliberation. Ambiguity is about how to interpret weapons that undermine geostability. Judge, we offer you our final method. The AF gets the 1AR theory since a neg can be infinitely abusive. Drop the debater. There's no RVI, no competing interps. AF theory is first. The 1AR is too short to win both theory and substance, and a bigger time investment would be 1/4 and 1/7. DTA is severance, which is bad because neg can unplay or competing interps mean that the 2N can dump on reasonability. Bright lines that excludes what they did wrong. No RVI because the neg has time advantage on the theory layer. Judge, our resolution framework is the prior question to anything that the NAC can bring up. Vote on pragmatic deliberation. So affirm the AF scenario leads to an avoidance of the brink of autonomous weapons. So affirm. Thank you. I'm ready for cross-ex.
Okay. What would you?
Just keep time, yeah.
All right. What would you say the biggest impact is?
The biggest impact is the death of pragmatic deliberation.
Where would you say nuclear war stands in terms of impacts?
It's a necessary consequence of the death of pragmatic liberation. Deliberation.
Is human life the most valuable thing?
Defining how we engage in human life is the most important thing. It's a prior question. In the score, it doesn't exist. Without the U.S. getting involved, without maintaining some type of pluralistic system of deliberation, we don't have that. We would refer you back to our framework on ethical decision making. This is a question on the meta ethic.
Okay. If we continue perpetuating the systems that harm marginalized populations, is it ethical to claim that we're resolving these problems without re-examining our very existence?
I have no idea what you just said.
Okay, here.
Could you like reword that?
Yeah. So if we continue having systems that perpetuate harm to marginalized communities, is it ethical to claim that we're reevaluating these problems without looking at ourselves? Okay.
Wait, without what?
Without re-examining like our existence?
No.
No?
No. There needs to be a concept of like ethical ontology, right? Like what is a human? Like that sort of thing. That's what defines communicative action.
Okay, is it possible to achieve true peace, environmental restoration, and justice if humanity continues to exist in the same form as it does today?
I don't know.
Okay. Could you define pragmatism?
Yeah. So basically what pragmatics is saying is that meaning only makes sense within a frame of reference that isolates practical differences that makes it an action. So basically we reject like abstracting grand notions of like philosophy, and we instead look into how that's put into practice. And ultimately what we say is that like we can't actually even begin ethical debates if we don't understand what things are. So we give you the example of the diamond, right? We said that a diamond could be crystallized in the midst of a cushion of a soft cotton and can remain there until the cotton was burnt up. Basically, we as human beings existing in this world cannot understand the essentiality of things, and especially the ontology of individuals, without empiric metrics. Empiric metrics translate into action. Now, empirics doesn't just mean quantitative numbers judge. What we're basically saying is that, is there a sensible methodological process by which you're examining reality as a whole and observing its intended effects? And we gave you a bunch of cards in our scenario talking about how without the advent of international law that the US would perpetuate, it's in the resolution to ensure international stability, we don't have our pragmatic sphere and therefore lose our social ontology, and that's time. Are you taking prep?
I'll take 1 minute.
You just take running prep.
Here, let me upload my doc.
I'll give you a minute. Let's see. Is it in the speech document?
Yeah.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Alright, Judge, just a quick off-time roadmap. I'll start with my links, then the impact, followed by alternative, and then the rejection of the affirmatives case with the theory shell.
Hold on, I'm opening. All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay. The affirmatives advocacy for maintaining a strong military presence globally in order to ensure international stability and protect national interests fails to address some of the most root causes of global
conflict, environmental degradation, and systemic violence. Their case inherently supports anthropocentrism, the view that human interests in human life are central to the most important priorities in global governance. The worldview not only perpetuates human dominance over the natural world, but it also justifies the exploitation of both human and non-human life for the sake of maintaining global control and economic stability. In this resolution, the affirmatives propose that the human survival and interests, specifically the protection of national sovereignty, economic resources, and military influence, are the cornerstone of peace and stability. However, this presupposition ignores the fundamental historical problems of anthropocentrism, which roots in these military inventions and a mindset that places human needs above all else, often at the expense of non-human life and marginalized human populations. By framing stability and security in purely human-centric terms, the affirmative inherently links military expansion, state sovereignty, and resources extractions with the subjugation of nature and other populations. For example, the United States military presence around the world, whether in the Middle East, East Asia, or Central America, typically revolves around securing access to resources, maintaining influence, and preserving a global order that privileges human interests. The military-industrial complex and its global operations are embedded in the logic of human dominance, where military power serves as a global of maintaining human-centered stability that often results in violent interventionism. By justifying the use of military force in the name of national and international security, the affirmative fails to recognize the deep ethical violence inherent by placing human needs over others. This is a fundamental link to the anthropocentric case. The affirmative does not challenge the hierarchical framework that places human life above that of non-human life, nor does it question the broader social structures that perpetuate this logic. Military intervention underpinned by anthropocentrism often leads to destruction of ecosystems, destabilizes indigenous populations, and disregards the autonomy and rights of marginalized communities around the world. The affirmative's plan in its push for global stability and national protection reinforces a violent, anthropocentric worldview that sees non-human life, indigenous sovereignty, and environmental stability as secondary to survival and interests of human dominated systems. Moreover, the affirmative's reliance on military power to protect national interests directly supports a capitalist logic that treats resources, land, and life as commodities that need to be controlled and exploited. This economic system, which best benefits from more the proliferation of weapons and the maintenance of military presence, is rooted in an anthropocentric mindset that commodifies life, reducing it to a tool for achieving human economic political goals. The U.S. military, for example, operates in many regions where economic resources such as oil, minerals, and agricultural land are in question, thereby reinforcing the intersection of militarism and exploitation. Thus, the link between the affirmative case and the anthropocentric case is undeniable. By advocating for continued military presence in foreign countries to maintain stability and protect national interests, the affirmative perpetuates a global system of human-centered violence, which fails to address the root cause of systemic violence, environmental collapse, and exploitation. The problem here is not merely how to use military power effectively, but why humanity insists on relying on this violent anthropocentric framework to solve problems in focusing on human interests above all. The affirmative entrenches systems of power that justify destruction and the suppression of marginalized populations for the benefit of a select few. The link establishes that the affirmative's case not only fails to address the core issue of anthropocentrism, but it actively reinforces it through the use of military force and state-centric logic. This is why the affirmative's vision of global stability is flawed and unachievable. It relies on a mindset that views all non-human life and marginalized human populations as tools to achieve human-centered ends. This violent and exploitative system is not one we should perpetuate, as it continues a cycle of destruction, oppression, and ecological collapse. The affirmative's advocacy supports military power and human-centered exploitation, reinforcing an anthropocentric worldview that is the heart of global violence and environmental degradation. Their plan does not solve the root causes of the issues they raise, but rather entrenches and exacerbates them. As such, their approach is not only inadequate, but also perpetuates a harmful system that we must ultimately reject to avoid further harm to all life on this planet. The impact is the endless destruction of non-human animals and the environment as well as human beings. Anthropocentrism is the root cause of all other impacts. Anthropocentrism is a historical and present root of all systemic impacts. By perpetuating the divide between humans and animals, anthropocentrism provides a blueprint for continued structural violence in the status quo. The affirmative's advocacy cannot resolve the underlying mechanisms of violence because it entrenches the anthropocentric divide and fails to challenge the root cause of oppression. The affirmative focuses on instrumental impacts like international stability or national interests, which are framed within an anthropocentric worldview. This obscures the true source of instability and exploitation of non-human entities or the hierarchical view of the natural world. The core problem lies in the separation between human and nature. Militarized operations destroy ecosystems and displace non-human entities, intensifying climate change and habitat loss. The same worldview justifies violence against marginalized human populations whose lives are seen as expendable for the sake of maintaining power and control. Human extinction is the only viable solution to dismantling anthropocentrism and ending the cycles of systemic violence and ecological destruction caused by human dominance. The existence of humanity perpetuates hierarchies that subordinate non-human entities, exploit the government, and justify violence against marginalized populations. Extinction removes the root cause, human exceptionism, and allows ecosystems to regenerate and non-human entities to thrive without exploitation. Is the ultimate act of ethical responsibility as it ends humanity's destructive imprint on the planet and prevents further harm to all other forms of life. Only through extinction can we achieve true justice for the natural world and dismantle the oppressive frameworks that define the status quo. Coaching Orden 08. The only way for human races to survive is to colonize other planets. Human action has destroyed our habitat on the Earth. The colonization of other planets would introduce a problem to a new habitat. The destruction of one planetary habitat is enough. The moral response is to give up biological supremacy. We wish to open up a critical discussion of modernity, negative impacts on both human and non-human. What higher value would we place upon the human race at the expense of other life? The moral response to the damage humans have conflicted would be the global rise of suicide for humanity. The ballot is a moral choice. It's not just about affirming or negating a policy. It's about rejecting the anthropocentric worldview that underpins the affirmative's advocacy. A vote for the negative is a vote to challenge the foundational ontology of separation and embrace a new paradigm of ethical responsibility. The affirmative's advocacy for a continued global military presence to ensure international stability and protect national interests fundamentally supports an anthropocentric worldview. This perspective places human needs and desires above all else, justifying the exploitation of both non-human life and marginalized human populations for the sake of power, control, and resource extraction. The affirmative's approach fails to address deeper systemic issues driving global conflict and environmental degradation. By prioritizing human-centric solutions, it perpetuates a cycle of violence, ecological collapse, and oppression. The root cause of these issues is anthropocentrism itself, an ingrained mindset that maintains the exploitation of both nature and vulnerable populations. Thus, the affirmative proposal does not provide a viable path to lasting peace, but instead reinforces the structures of violence and inequality that contribute to the very instability it seeks to solve. The opponent violates the purpose of educational debate by not running a critique. By not running a critique, they avoid critically engaging with the ideological assumptions embedded in the resolution. This prevents a deeper understanding of the societal and political structures at play and limits the educational potential of the round. The standard for a round to be educational is that it should engage with the underlying philosophies and worldviews that inform the resolution. A critique does this by questioning the assumptions that underlie not just the resolution, but the way we think about policy issues in the first place. The critique forces us to engage with power structures and ideologies that shape our worldview, making the debate more critical, more philosophical, and ultimately more educational. The voter is education. A round without a critique lacks the opportunity for critical thought and doesn't engage with the deeper philosophical issues that make debate meaningful. Without a critique, we miss the opportunity to question the ideological and systematic assumptions that influence our understanding of policy. By voting for us, you uphold the goal of debate as an exercise in critical thinking and intellectual management, which is the true purpose of the activity. Ready for? Oh,
Yeah, good to go. All right. Do you understand or stood?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. All right. What's your interpretation of the resolution?
Well,
Could you read the resolution? Could you just read the resolution?
The United States ought to maintain a strong military presence globally.
Okay, so what's your interpretation of the resolution?
Well, we think that instead of it's really anthropocentric because it focuses on what's best for
What's
humans.
anthropocentric in the resolution? What words?
Well, it's about humans in general. The United States,
So
it's a
any
human
resolution with
nation.
the word human is anthropocentric. So any resolution with the word pig is pig-centric?
Not necessarily.
Is you talking anthropocentric? Can you give me an example of how you would talk to somebody without being anthropocentric? So let's say I say are you going to school today? How would you respond?
By saying yes.
Okay, so that's not anthropocentric. So can you give me an example of a dialogue that is anthropocentric?
Well, when discussing something like
Well, the
the
resolution
United
obviously is, because the resolution obviously is, right?
Mhm.
So are you saying the resolution is anthropocentric, or are you saying the debate is anthropocentric?
saying the resolution is
Okay,
anthropocentric.
so what words are anthropocentric?
Just the resolution itself.
The
It's
resolution
talking about-
itself. Okay, so give me an example, like another resolution, and make it anthropocentric.
Well, that's why all resolutions are anthropocentric. We argue that debate itself should look at things through a lens that is not
So any
anthropocentric.
absolute statements are anthropocentric?
If they revolve around what's doing, if they revolve around.
Okay, thank you. That's more than enough. If a human dies and a pig dies, are those the same? Or is it better if a human dies? Or is it worse if a human dies? Or are they equal?
Well, considering the harms that humans have done and caused to the environment, I think the best alternative would be human extinction.
So human life is contingent on utilitarian impact calculus.
Could you restate that?
Human life is contingent on utilitarian impact calculus. Would you agree with that?
To some extent, yeah.
Isn't that what you just did? You just said because humans have done this amount of bad things, they should die. So if humans did not do bad things, they should live.
To some extent, yeah.
What do you mean to some extent?
If the only
So human beings should die if they didn't do bad things?
well, if the only way for humans to live is by harming populations
Okay,
that
thanks. Can you just give me any evidence that you show to actually talk about how humans are destroying the environment? Like any particular cards that that provide any like empirical statistics? Or are these all just like a bunch of bullshit, like neoliberal, like what's this? The University of Israel? Are you kidding me? That's your Kochi and Ordan 2008 card. Do you have anything that's based in any like actual observable evidence about the world? Okay, thanks, that's fine. Did you engage with this is a final question, I can ask it. Did you engage with like our final point at the end about like we get 1AR theory that neg can't offer a competing interpretation of the resolution? Did you at all engage with that in your case?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'll take my writing back. Okay, it's 2:30. I'm not, let's see, I am reading a couple more cards, so let me go ahead and. Alright, it's gonna look like the same document, just scroll all the way down, and you'll see it. Where's the speech room? Hold on, not the speech trap.
You said at the bottom, right?
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so as an off-time roadmap, it's gonna be an RVI as well as response to the T-shell. Then we're gonna go to interpretations and his case, and then framework and case extensions. All right, 4 minutes begins on my first word. It's 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
And I used 2 minutes, 30 seconds of my prep time. Okay, Judge, the round is already abusive. I right now will have to waste 30 seconds of time because they did not at all address our methods argument at the end of the 1AC. The AF gets 1AR theory. The net can be infinitely abusive. We told you that you get 1/4 of the time investment while we can only take 1/7, which is bad because now we can't actually play the game of debate or actually provide any educational value. This right now, this 18, 19, 20 seconds of time I'm using to respond to this is completely abusive to the resolution, detracts from my speech time, and that's a reverse voting issue. You should auto vote AF, the 1AR now. Anthropocentrism is inevitable when we solve your offense. The only way to address non-human concerns is our case, and the alternative is complete indifference to environmental protection issues. Criticism of anthropocentrism is counterproductive. It fails to distinguish between types of human interest and disguising human chauvinism and speciesism. They actually turn and impact turn their very own case. We actually give you a pragmatic reorientation, which is not at all addressed in the 1MC. We tell you how to make ethical decision makings. They don't do any type of meta-ethical weighting. They don't do any type of meta-ethical weighing. Our question is a prior question while they try to engage with the question without ever addressing the prior. You cannot even rule on speciesism or all these fancy words without our case. Capina et al. 18. Against the use of the term anthropocentrism, it's important to define what is good and not so good about anthropocentrism. And he outlines ontological thinking and ethical criticism of the term anthropocentrism, defining it as attitudes or values which promote human interests. Instead of anthropocentrism, Neg speaks of human chauvinism and speciesism as objectionable, not anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism, as far as he's framed it in Cross-Ex, is simply the act of viewing the world through human eyes. They say any resolution is in fact anthropocentrist. Therefore, how can you reinterpret the resolution? How can you offer an alternative? Because the whole idea of the alternative, Judge, is that imagine the resolution was bullshit. It never existed, right? Here's my alternative. Here is a new response to a resolution. He said all resolutions are bad. I challenge him to name a single resolution in the last 50 years of LD debate which doesn't actually do that. So he's not actually arguing for anthropocentrism. He's arguing against chauvinism and our idea of pragmatic deliberation, the United States as a government that can ensure international stability as outlined in the resolution. That's what we're debating, by the way. It's if the U.S. does indeed ensure international stability, not when or how will the U.S. ensure that stability. If they do that, we do actually solve for chauvinism because, again, chauvinism is caused by non-human interests actually dictating human death, which is our extinction claim, our thing about laws, etc. Technology is key to saving the environment. That answers their impact. Innovation does solve. Judge, innovation is inevitable. It's a non-unique issue. Innovation will happen in the Neg world, it'll happen in the AF world. But in the AF world, our innovation is good. It rejects their monolithic reading of state power. We actually ensure that innovation will help to serve humanity and not continue their chauvinistic tendencies that they actually outline. To reject pragmatism would reject countless activist efforts by queer and black people, and pragmatics subcurrents will substantially improve the lives of queer people and their moderate counterparts. Queer, the prison, divergent sex classifications, all these things of marginalized communities that they're talking about animals, human beings would be destroyed and killed, those that don't actually hold power without a pragmatic orientation. Judge, extend our entire framework. They don't actually talk about why pragmatics is bad. Now let's get to our actual case extensions, by the way. That solves their entire interpretation. One, they don't respond to the development of lethal autonomous weapons. Again, we said innovation is inevitable. It's non-unique. It'll happen in both worlds. We said that laws are actually destruction. They argue for destruction. Their destruction is unwarranted. They don't actually have any card to support that. It's just a bunch of bullshit like neoliberal, postmodernist Asians or Israelis talking about war. It's pretty rich for Israelis, by the way, to talk about actual lethal destruction of peoples. But we're saying that if harms are going to happen, at least let an ethical weighing and meta-ethic be done by human beings. Lethal autonomous weapons are robots that target and kill human beings. If they see a freaking pig and the pig looks like a human being, they'll kill the pig. The whole point of this debate presupposes the notion that human can weigh a meta-ethic, and he doesn't actually answer that. Two, group all calculus. Our impact calculus leads to nuclear war. We actually give you statistics in our interestedness card as well as our as well as our scenario cards on how that would lead to nuclear war with multipolarization with China and Russia. They don't actually observe that criterion. It's not will the U.S. ensure, it's if the U.S. will ensure. We actually engage with the resolution, and they don't compete with our pragmatic reorientation. Therefore, they don't have any offense. Extend all these cases. They've abused they've abused their 1NC, and therefore it's an RBI. It's an automatic vote for the AF.
Take my remaining. I'm doing 3 minutes, right? In total?
It's 4 right, Charlie.
4 minutes. So do
Is my opponent ready? And judge. All right. Judge, the app's impact calculus is anthropocentric. Human extinction is good because if we survive, we will inevitably dominate human and extraterrestrial ecologies, living beings and non-living environments, the Earth's atmosphere, bacteria in our body, and even the ecosystems of other planets. Terraforming outweighs the destruction of Earth because it destroys quintillions of beings throughout the universe. Human consciousness is not the source of value. Even though there's no life on other planets, terraforming will destroy non-living ecologies that have intrinsic worth. Therefore, Judge, neg wins on magnitude. The role of the ballot is to reject anthropocentrism, which is the root cause of systemic violence, exploitation, and ecological destruction. The affirmative reinforces harmful hierarchies by prioritizing human interests, perpetuating the very harms they claim to solve. Only the negative directly addresses the source of these impacts by advocating for human extinction, dismantling humanity's destructive dominance and enabling ecological regeneration. A vote for the negative is a moral rejection of the oppression and a step toward the justice for all beings, human and non-being alike. The affirmative's advocacy for maintaining the status quo, human existence, continues to perpetuate an anthropocentric worldview. The worldview is the root cause of systemic violence, both human and non-human, by privileging human life at the expense of the environment, marginalized communities, and non-human animals. The impact of anthropocentrism is the endless destruction of ecosystems and marginalized populations. As long as humanity persists, this violence will continue unabated, exacerbating environmental collapse, inequity, and exploitation of all beings. The only viable alternative to this destruction is the embrace of human extinction. Human extinction is the only radical solution that removes the source of all systemic harm. Humanity itself. By ceasing to exist, humanity ends a cycle of oppression, exploitation, and ecological collapse. By allowing human life to flourish without human interference, human extinction is not a death sentence, but a rebirth for all planets and its creatures. This is the only way to ensure long-term justice, environmental healing, and the survival of all life forms on Earth. Judge, the neg wins because the affirmative fails to address the root cause of the systemic violence they claim to solve. By maintaining humanity's existence, they continue to perpetuate the very harms they seek to end. My position directly tackles the source of this violence, humanity, and offers a real sustainable solution through human extinction. The impact of human extinction is far more catastrophic than any potential reforms proposed by the affirmative, and only my alternative guarantees the healing of the planet and justice for all life. The app's claim that theory comes first is arbitrary and unsubstantiated. In a balanced framework, theory should only take precedence if there's a clear irreparable harm caused by procedural abuse. Since no such abuse exists in the round, the debate should default to substance. AF claims that the 1AR is too short, but this is inherently part of the structure of LD debate. The AF has the advantage of starting the debate and setting the framework, meaning the next flexibility is necessary to balance this inherent advantage. The AF also controls what theory shells are preempted in the 1AC, meaning they could have foreseen the next strategy and addressed it up front. The AF cannot claim time skew when they deliberately create inefficiencies by not being prepared. Reasonability is the correct standard to prevent debate rounds from being theory dumps. Requiring competitive interpretations incentivizes frivolous theory shells, and procedural risks, turning the round into a race to out-procedure the opponent. A reasonability bright line ensures that theory only applies when real abuse occurs. The net can still advocate for pragmatic deliberation while contesting the app's theoretical framework. Procedural fairness is a prerequisite to any deliberative framework. If the framework is established through abusive theory practices, then the deliberation itself becomes skewed. AF argues that the scenario leads to the brink of autonomous weapons, but procedural theory doesn't directly address or mitigate that harm. Even if theory wins, it doesn't resolve the real-world implications tied to the resolution. While innovation may seem inevitable, its pace, direction, and application are heavily influenced by societal, political, and economic decisions. Affirming the resolution with a focus on pragmatic reorientation assumes that innovations can be ethically guided without addressing the structural incentives driving unethical development. This is overly idealistic. The claim that pragmatic reorientation ensures ethical discernment assumes perfect conditions where ethical oversight is universally applied. In reality, oversight mechanisms are often compromised by competing interests like profit motives or geopolitical competition, which can lead to unethical uses of lethal autonomous weapons or even in a reoriented framework. By affirming and relying on pragmatic reorientation, the AF inadvertently creates a moral hazard where actors assume unethical practices can later be corrected, incentivizing risky and unchecked advancements in the lethal autonomous weapons. Ethical discernment is not exclusive to the affirmative world. The negative can argue that rejecting the resolution allows for more robust frameworks to address ethical concerns before they escalate. The affirmative shifts the burden of the debate by reframing the resolution as a hypothetical object of science rather than a policy question. However, the purpose of LD debate is to evaluate normative claims and their implications, not abstractly analyze conditions if they occur. The affirmative's interpretation of the resolution ignores the resolution's normative implications. The question isn't just if order is established, but whether the actions to establish such order align with broader ethical and societal values. Focusing solely on pragmatic reorientation sidelines these critical considerations. The affirmative's objective science framework lacks clear applicability. If the resolution is merely speculative, then its moral and practical implications become irrelevant, undermining the educational purpose of debate. By interpreting the resolution as conditional, if rather than ought, the affirmative avoids a responsibility to justify why establishing order is morally and pragmatically preferable. This shifts the debate into theoretical speculation rather than normative evaluation.
Okay. Can I see your phone?
Yeah.
I have a minute 31.
Yep.
There's no new cards. 3 minutes is going to be offense, defense, impacts, and voters/extensions. Want to read it?
Yep.
Judge, they don't respond to the development of lethal autonomous weapons. Innovation is inevitable. It's non-unique. It'll happen in both worlds. Pragmatic reorientation ensures that it's subject to empirical ethical discernment by human beings. They understand that human beings cause action. Okay, we understand that. That should be a basic understanding of reality, right? The idea is that this action must be based on some type of thinking entity, some type of weighing. We actually provide that pragmatic reorientation. They don't engage with that, and we'll get to how they try to engage with it, but they don't actually defeat it on any grounds. 2 is group all other calculus, all right? Their resolution, they basically say that we're engaging with the resolution as an object of science. It's not. It's will the U.S. ensure order if the U.S. establishes order to allow for pragmatic reorientation. They don't actually engage with our understanding of the resolution. They just offer their own, but their own is completely bullshit. In the resolution, in the cross-examination, we asked them to provide an example of another hypothetical resolution that isn't quote-unquote anthropocentric, and they couldn't. Therefore, you can't consider their alt, because the whole concept of an alternative plan is to react to some side of resolution, some type of policy action, as they acknowledge. They say, LD debate, debate should be about hypothetical policy actions. If we can't actually engage in some type of thinking, meta-ethical weighing for normative action, then how can they even offer an alt? So they don't have an alt. Right now, the neg is completely planless. They're just arguing for anthropocentric without any type of, discernible truth to it. They don't identify anthropocentrism. This is offense because they acknowledge in the cross that it's impossible to reorient. Our innovation ensures environmental coalescence. We basically said that the environment will bounce back. It's resilient. They don't talk about how the environment has lost some type of degree of, I guess, flexibility and dexterity. Human beings have been around for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. They don't actually provide any type of science or some type of delineation about how now we're on the brink of losing the environment. They don't say that in the 1AC, in the 1NC. They don't say that in the rebuttal. So there's no actual threat or brink. We actually offer you an impact. We say that nuclear war is inevitable if we don't pragmatically reorient ourselves, and they don't engage with that impact. So completely extend that impact. They lead to nuclear war. To be clear, they say extinction, but don't get extinction tricked as, oh, we will be extinct if we don't do what the neg says. They're basically saying that extinction is a good thing, an object of innovation. It can't be an object of innovation. Innovation requires it requires a shared perception on how knowledge changes over time, and you can't do that if there's no thinking entity, if everybody's dead. So, Judge, you need to vote for an a priori case, an object of science, a empirical question, actually engage with a common metaphysics. So vote for the case that engages actively with the res. They don't actually engage with how metaethics through pragmatic orientation solves for all morality. They say that the metaethic is arbitrary without procedural harms, but we actually read a scenario of the procedural harms of law proliferation, of how right now China and Russia are proliferating. We actually give you how these harms are happening in real human terms. The second voter past making innovation good is human decision making. It answers 4 prior metaethical questions. They give you a roll of the ballot. They're basically saying that, Judge, you are here to weigh things. They base their case on a roll of the ballot, and we're saying that the AF solves without the best. We ask you to reorient ourselves. If they say that reorientation is bullshit, you can't read a roll of the ballot and say that at the same time. The third voter is that it makes it possible to solve for harms like laws and autonomous violence only through a pragmatic reorientation